Hi, everybody. This is the last video of the second quarter, and this is just kind of tying everything together from what we've been talking about here lately. So we have polygons. Remember, polygons are multi-sided figures. Multi-sided figures. So any type of shape, a closed shape is going to be a polygon. Then we move into quadrilaterals. A quadrilateral is a four-sided figure. Any four-sided figure. Then we're going to move into parallelograms. So a parallelogram those have been the shapes that we spent most of the time talking about. So a parallelogram, remember, is a four-sided figure, a quadrilateral, that the opposite sides are parallel. The opposite sides are parallel. Then the parallelogram we split into two different things. So on one side we have a rhombus. So a rhombus is a parallelogram with four equal sides. Then we also have rectangle, which is a parallelogram with four equal angles. And in this case, those four angles are going to be 90-degree angles. And then lastly, when we tie everything back together, we get a square. So over here, there's some questions. It says always, sometimes, never. A square is a rhombus. Well, a square always follows underneath rhombus. So a square is always a type of a rhombus because it has four equal sides. So that's always. A rhombus is a square. Sometimes. It might be a square, but it doesn't have to be a square. So that's a sometimes. A rectangle is a square. Well, not all rectangles are squares. So that's a sometimes. A parallelogram is a rectangle. Sometimes. Not all parallelograms have to be rectangles, but sometimes they are. A rhombus is a rectangle. A rhombus is a rectangle. Well, a rhombus might be a rectangle. So that's a sometimes. And a square is a parallelogram. Always. A square is always a type of a parallelogram. So that's an always. Now I'm going to go ahead and scroll down to this chart. So on the chart, we're going to mark the things that we know. All angles are congruent. All angles are congruent. So we're talking about the angles being congruent. We're talking about those outside angles. So the outside angles being congruent, going to be a rectangle, because all the angles are 90 degrees, and a square, because all the angles are 90 degrees. All sides are congruent. Well, that one's going to be a rhombus and a square. So all the sides being congruent, rhombus and square. Diagonals are congruent. Well, the diagonals being congruent, that's a rectangle and a square. Diagonals are perpendicular. Diagonals being perpendicular, that was a rhombus and a square. Diagonals bisect the vertex angle. So what they mean by that is if I've got the figure, this diagonal is going to cut this in half. So that was true in a rhombus and a square. Both pairs of opposite sides are, and that should say congruent. Both pairs of opposite sides are congruent. That's true on all of them. Both pairs of opposite angles are congruent. That's true on all of them. Because as soon as I mark parallelogram, I know it's true for everything else. Because all of these are types of parallelograms. Any two consecutive vertex angles are supplementary. Any two consecutive vertex angles are supplementary. So that's saying that if I've got a shape, that this guy and this guy is going to be supplementary, or this one and this one will be supplementary. Well, that's true on any parallelogram. So that's true across the board. Diagonals bisect each other. That's also true across the board. So these are the different ways that it kind of works out. Remember I said a square has all the properties. So a square, every single property was marked. Then if you noticed, the rectangle and rhombus kind of have opposite ones until we get to the ones that are parallelograms. And then parallelogram, everything gets marked. So that ties everything together so you know kind of the different properties for all the different shapes. This is the last video. I'm hoping you watched the last video. If you did watch the last video, email me and say Merry Christmas, and you get 5 extra credit points. So if you watch the video to the end, email me, wish me a Merry Christmas, and you get 5 extra credit points. And Merry Christmas, everybody. Bye-bye.
Some person might just